Hi, welcome to the Summer Creative Retreat. My name is Winnie Akande of Winnie Bee Designs, and I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to Peggy Dean of the Pigeon Letters for inviting me back for a second year of this creativity extravaganza, if you will. So sit back and enjoy, and we're gonna jump right in. Today I'll be walking you through how to take your calligraphy and put it on anything, such as a makeup bag or a t-shirt like this. That's my calligraphy, and today I'll be walking you through how to put your calligraphy on almost anything. So a little bit more about me. I have been probably teaching myself calligraphy since 2017 and really hit my stride in 2018. And in 2020 was using my calligraphy to make gifts for a friend. But then in 2021, June 21 to be specific, I launched my Etsy shop. So I will link to that below, but I would love if you would just take a look at my calligraphy card. Then if you like it, buy or share with a friend or do whatever, but it's just a passion of mine, and I'm super excited to be sharing it with you all. So let's get into the supplies. So this workshop does have quite a long list of supplies, and I'm going to tell you up front, I have acquired all of these things because, like any good crafter, I walk into the art store with good intentions. And so I am sitting in my craft room, which could also be referred to as my she shed or the room of good intentions. So a lot of the stuff that I have here, I have acquired over time, and I'll talk a little bit about how I got these things. But please, if it is not in your financial fantasy to run out and buy all of this stuff, we can definitely talk about ways around it. Okay, so here we go. So the first thing that you're going to need is your calligraphy tools of choice. So my calligraphy tools of choice are the Tombow Furunosuke small tip pen. I actually really like the soft tip pen. That's my favorite pen, but the hard tip pen is fine. You're also going to need, or you might like, I love rhodia paper. It's really helpful for when I am initially coming up with a design. And then once I have that, I like to use tracing paper. Any tracing paper is fine, just to make sure the layout is the way that I want it. Not pictured here, you're gonna need some heat transfer vinyl. So I'm gonna be using gold vinyl and then sparkly white gold vinyl. You're going to need the items that you wanna transfer onto. So here is a blank makeup bag. I'm also going to be making a t-shirt. So here is a t-shirt, just for reference. This is not the t-shirt I'm using. A brand that I really love to wear, to receive, to make t-shirts is the Bella and Canvas brand. It is so soft. It feels like your favorite shirt from the very first day that you wear it. So that is my personal preferred brand. The next thing that you'll need is a silhouette cutter. This is the Silhouette Cameo 3. We are actually on the 4th iteration of it. So if you decide that this is something that you want to do and pursue, you definitely can go ahead and spend the money and get the Silhouette 4. Or you could try and find the Silhouette 3 on eBay or some site like that. I will say I got my Silhouette from my brother. So my brother was initially trying to start his own t-shirt line, but he couldn't make the silhouette cutter work. And I had seen a workshop or seen a video by Becca Cortice from the Happy Ever Crafter talking about turning your vinyl, your calligraphy, into stickers with Megan from All She Wrote Notes. And so I'll make sure I include that YouTube video somewhere in all of this so you can access it. And so I went out and got a silhouette, and then my brother was like, I have one and I can't make it work, you can just have mine. And I was like, I'm determined to make this work, and I made it work, and I have loved using it. So that's how I got my silhouette. You can also use Cricut. I like the I started off with the Silhouette. I think the Silhouette is a slightly lower price point than the Cricut, but whatever fits your fantasy is fine. And then the other thing that you'll need is the Mini but Mighty Cricut heat press. So you'll actually see me use a real t-shirt press later on in the workshop, but honestly this Mini Mighty press is plenty, and you can usually get it on a good sale at the art store for like $50. The other thing that I have, this I just got, I downloaded from an Etsy shop, is just a layout tool to make sure that the vinyl is centered to the t-shirt. So I have this, and I can reference the link to that. The other thing that you'll need that's not listed is just a little bit of patience and a good attitude, and we'll just go ahead and get started. So the first step in putting your calligraphy on almost anything is the calligraphy. So I would encourage you to think of a phrase or a word or a group of words that you would like to put your calligraphy on. For this example, I'm going to be making a makeup bag and a t-shirt. On the t-shirt, I'm going to put the phrase phenomenal woman, a poem by the late Maya Angelou, and then all the things on a makeup bag, which is just my favorite phrase when I'm writing a to-do list or a brain dump of anything that's going on. So the first step is I'm going to show you my calligraphy and putting that calligraphy on, literally just starting off and putting your calligraphy on paper. So the first part of putting your calligraphy on anything is the calligraphy. So here I am typing out or writing out my first phrase, phenomenal woman. Please note that this is not the normal speed of my calligraphy. This video has been sped up 400 times. And so here I'm just writing out my phrase, phenomenal woman, on graph rhodia paper. So once I've done that, how I adjust the layout is by using tracing paper. So I'm going to rewrite my phrase, phenomenal woman, again over the top. And so once I've written the phrase, phenomenal woman, I'm going to move the paper around. Yep, here I'm going to move the paper around, line it up to where I like, and then I'm going to read or copy the phrase or trace the phrase, woman. And so then once I'm happy with that, I'm going to grab my light box, and with my light box, I'm going to trace this onto regular smooth HP 32-pound white paper. And so the reason I do that is that it allows me to get a more crisp shot when I go to digitize it on my phone. So here I am just rewriting phenomenal woman for the third time, and who doesn't need that affirmation regularly? So I'm writing that there, and I am happy with it. So the next phrase that I'm writing out is my phrase, all the things. So all the things is a little bit of an easier phrase because everything is just going to sit on one line, so the layout is not as important. So once I'm done with this step, I'm going to actually skip the step with the tracing paper and go right to my light box. And so just to keep things simple, I'm going to use the same sheet of paper I wrote phenomenal woman on, give it some space, and then recopy all the things. And once you're done, you are done with step one, your calligraphy. So after you have your calligraphy finalized, the next thing that you're going to need to do is to prepare it for upload into the software. So I use a Silhouette desktop cutting machine, but you can also use the Cricut or any other brand that's out there. So with most of these desktop cutting machines will come an included software. So I use the Silhouette Studio to edit it. So if you're using a Cricut, the process may be a little different for you, but very similar. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually on my phone, I'm just going to take a photo of my calligraphy, and I'm going to change it to the setting noir, which is just a black and white, and then I'm going to increase the brightness and increase the contrast so I get the blackest black possible and the whitest white possible. That's going to be super essential for the step of turning my calligraphy and transporting it to the Silhouette cutting machine website, or not website, excuse me, the software. So now we are looking at my iPhone. If you have a different phone, these settings will be different. But what I'm doing here is I've just taken a quick photo, cropping the image a little bit to get rid of some extra space that I don't need. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to go to the setting in the iPhone called Noir. And basically it's the filter that turns it into a black and white photo. Then once I've done that, I'm going to make one more edit where I'm going to increase the exposure to make it whiter, and then increase the contrast to make the ink blacker. And so it's going to be super helpful when we are digitizing in the software. So once I have made all the edits on my phone using iCloud, I'll download the photos from the iPhone and then open them in the Silhouette Studio software. Then using the tracing function, I'm going to trace around the calligraphy, so it actually gives me an outline of the calligraphy, and I'm going to do that for both phrases, phenomenal woman and all the things. Then next what I'm going to do is outline it so it will cut, but the very important thing when you're using the silhouette for cutting, especially if you're putting vinyl on fabric, is that you need to actually cut it in a mirror image. So if you set your silhouette settings saying that, oh, I'm using heat transfer vinyl, it's going to tell you, do you want to flip the image? I normally like to mirror flip the image myself so I have more control over how it's printing and where it's going to print on my cutting mat, but it's super important that you mirror flip the image over.
So here I have opened up the Silhouette Studio software. I'm just making a couple of changes. So I've increased the size of my mat. Now I'm opening up my file and bringing in the image. So I'm getting an error message that says the file size is too large. That's okay, I'm going to make it smaller and actually lock in the ratio so I don't accidentally distort the image. So now I'm going to go over to the tracing panel. I'm just going to do, I like to do my vinyl cutouts on separate pages. So I'm just going to do Phenomenal Woman first. So I use the tracing tool. And then if you're making a t-shirt, you want to research the size the vinyl needs to be in order to be well displayed. So the shirt I'm making is 2XL. And so I want my vinyl width to be about 11.5 inches, so it looks appropriate on the t-shirt. So that's the changes that I am making there. And so now I'm just like sizing it up on the in the software. And so the image that you see here is actually a replica of the cutting mat. So I'm just moving it around to make sure that I am maximizing the space. And so I'm turning on the grid lines to make sure everything's lined up nicely. And I'm seeing that it is. So I'm like, okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. So now I'm going to I copied that image to a new sheet, and now I'm going to do the same thing with all the things. So I go to the tracing panel, do solid fill, and do trace, and it's just going to do an outline of all the things. This is a slightly easier image because it's smaller. So I've measured my makeup bag size, and it's 9 inches wide. So I want to have an inch of margin on either side, so I'm going to take it down. Or I'm going to lock in the ratio, but I'm going to increase the size to about 7.5 inches. So that's what I'm doing there. So I think in this moment I was actually measuring the size of my makeup bag. So yep, so I want it to be 7 inches. And so I go back and I'm looking at it, and I think what I realized is like, oh, I need to send this to the printer to be cut. But what I remember is that because this is going on a cloth product, I need to flip the image horizontally. And so I'm going to do the same thing with Phenomenal Woman. So I'm going to flip it horizontally. And I like flipping it horizontally myself. The software will actually tell you if you have selected heat transfer vinyl, if you need to mirror your image. I like to flip it over myself because it just gives me more control over how it's going to show up, how it's going to print. So I prefer to do it that way. So here I am saving my my file, and so Silhouette has a free cloud service that you get to use, and so I like to save it there on the cloud. I actually end up saving it twice because because of this video, my setup is a little different. So I'm going to utilize a feature that they have with where you can save it to a USB drive, and so I'm going to save it to a USB drive. Both files, and then I'm just going to work with my Silhouette desktop cutter remotely. So here I am, I'm going to the cut settings. So my particular vinyl cutter, the blade is incredibly sharp. So I find that I have to manipulate the settings a little bit. And so that's one of the things that you'll learn with time with your cutter. So I find that I need to reduce the force and reduce the speed so I don't end up cutting through my mat. So I'm going to save that again just to make sure that it's saved that those settings are saved on my USB drive. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to do the exact same thing for my All the Things makeup bag. So I'm going to go and find the vinyl. And so for this one, I mentioned that we're using a glitter sparkly vinyl. And so that's a little thicker. And so I think I leave the blade setting a little bit higher, but reduce the speed and the force a little bit. And so I'm going to save that, and we're good to go.
Okay, so once we have our calligraphy ready to go in the software, it's time to basically cut it out and print it. You're not really printing, but you know what I'm saying. Okay, so when you do that, it's super important to note that you actually put your vinyl, so this is a piece of heat resistant metallic vinyl that we're gonna use on our Phenomenal Woman shirt. So you see the gold side, so the gold side is what I want to be seen on the shirt. But on the back side is there's this kind of matte finish. So when you place your vinyl on your mat, or when you decide to load it into your printer, you want basically the side you don't want, you want that side facing up. So that's super important in using your vinyl cutter. So once you have that loaded onto your machine, you're ready to go and hit send and send it to the printer or the cutter.
Here I am cutting out the vinyl. So one thing on the Silhouette Studio is actually you can see how many inches your vinyl is going to be. So just to be safe, I always like to add an extra inch. So I'm just using a regular paper cutter to cut out my vinyl. That's my all the things paper, and that's that. So then once we have that ready to go, I am just loading up the desktop cutter. I've actually used a USB, so I have a better shot of what's going on. So I am selecting the file off of the USB, and I'm sending it to print. And so now it is being printed out, or I keep saying print, I mean cut. It's being cut out. And so my Silhouette cutter can be a little bit finicky, so I usually stand over it and make sure that it is cutting correctly and that the machine doesn't jam up on me. But like I said before, I prefer using a mat. I just personally get better results when I use the mat. So it takes about a minute or so, and this is sped up for viewing. So it's just cutting everything out, and it just does a really good job. So there it is, the cutting is done, and so you can kind of see the cutout. This is all the things being printed out on the sparkly glitter vinyl. So that will be cut out, and that takes about a minute as well. And so this is going super fast. Normally, if this is in real time, it's very, very loud. And so it tends to scare my cat, but it's a pretty quick process.
So once your image is now done cutting, it's time to weed. So weeding is basically removing those pieces of vinyl that you don't want to be transferred via heat onto your final product. So it's really important to weed. And the biggest advice I can give with weeding is to pay attention to your eyes, or in some instances to that negative space that creates the letter. So I only have the letter I in the word thing, so I just have to make sure that I keep the I, that little piece that wants to come up, I make sure I keep that down so it transfers. But now we're gonna weed and remove it. So when you're done weeding, you're gonna have an image where if you were to turn it around now on the plastic side, you would see your image the way you want it to look on your final product.
So this is me weeding. I actually really enjoy weeding. I get satisfaction out of it, but you can see here where I'm just removing all of those spaces. So anywhere that the calligraphy creates loops, encloses a space is something that I would want to weed. So here I put my little pieces off to the side. I wouldn't recommend that. What I actually recommend is that you get a piece of tape and put it on the back of your hand, so pieces don't fly away. But see, I'm going to turn it over, and now you see that, well, you don't really see. It's going to pop back up in a second. But what you're going to see is I'm slowly lifting it off the paper. And so when it is completely lifted off the mat, rather, and I turn it around, there is my phrase, phenomenal woman. But like, see, those little dots got connected. So I have learned with my all the things vinyl piece. And so I have a piece of tape on the back of my left hand, and so I'm putting all the small pieces there so they don't get lost on the floor or, junk up my place. And so, see, there's that descender and the G, and so now I am ripping off the bigger piece of vinyl. And here what I'm actually fighting with is making sure that the dot of the letter I in the word things remains on the mat, so it actually transfers correctly. So I realized that I had a couple of pieces that I left off, and I'm going to remove the excess and then peel it off the mat. My cutter did a much better job with the glitter paper, so it was easier to remove it, and now you can see it.
Okay, so once you have your vinyl cut out and ready to go, it's now a time to apply the heat. So there's a lot of options that you can play with when it comes to heat transfer vinyl. So I actually have the Cricut mini press. I have the Cricut 12 by 12 heat press, and then I also have a clamp down heat press, which you'll see me use. What's most important to know is, so I honestly, like probably any true crafter, have acquired all of this stuff over time in a path of good intentions, and I wanted to do this project and I only needed it for one thing. But if you are going to make the investment, I would honestly say you are probably okay starting off with the mini circuit heat press. So here is my box of the Circuit EV Press Mini, and I think this is plenty if you are just wanting to get into heat transfer vinyl. You can definitely go out if it's in your means to buy a bigger heat press, but you know, I got my first heat press in I think Christmas season one year for like $49 at Michael's. So that I think is usually the lowest they'll go unless, you know, something new is coming out. But a mini heat press is all you need if you really like what you are seeing here.
So this is a quick shot of my big heat press, and so I have applied the shirt to the heat press. I'm using my little centering tool to make sure that it's perfectly lined up. And then I am bringing over my vinyl, and I think what I realized is that, oh, I have some excess capacity, so I'm trimming off the extra plastic and then using the tool just to line up the center. So this piece ends up being about 11 inches, and so I've lined it up perfectly. And then I'm going to take a Teflon sheet to cover it up, and I'm going to press it and just let the machine do its thing. Press, press, press. So this is about 90 seconds at 350 degrees. So depending on the heat press that you're using, I would just encourage you to research the settings for the vinyl and how long it will take. So this is a pretty powerful machine. So the heat press has gone off at this point, and so what I'm doing here is I'm just testing to see if the vinyl has transferred on properly, and what I'm finding is that it hasn't really heated up enough. So I'm just playing with it, and this is what I was talking about in needing patience and a good attitude. So I'm going to go back and apply the heat press for another 90 seconds. Decided to let it go for another 90 seconds, and so in a moment or two the heat press is going to go off, and then I'm going to test it. I would say be really careful here. This is a very, very hot element, and so honestly safety would say that I should take it off to test it, but it's still not quite as melted as I would like, so I'm going to let it go for a little bit longer. So the additional reheating here is done, and I'm finding that here that it's lifting a little bit but not quite, so I'm actually going to use my mini heat press to do some more direct detailed work on it instead. Now it's on to the makeup bag. So I've put in a towel and a piece of cardboard just to give it some more padding to make sure that the label or the vinyl doesn't wrinkle. And so I'm going to add a vinyl covering on top to make sure it doesn't melt. And then I'm making this really, really tight. And so one thing I can say about heat presses is that they're not all created equally. So if you decide to go out and make the investment in getting a heat press like the one you see here, yours is going to be really different. So I would say do your research and make sure you like what you have. This one I got from my brother, so I just had to make do with what I had. And so the timer didn't set for this one because of just how much pressure is being applied. So I'm monitoring the time on my watch at this point. So it's about to go off in a second, and then I'm going to come back and release the heat. Be super careful. This is a very, very hot machine. I mean, it's 350 degrees, so mind your hands.
So I used the big heat press, so now that the heat press is done, it's time to lift the protective plastic off, and depending on the vinyl material, this could be a really finicky process. So go slow and be patient with it.
So for my Phenomenal Woman t-shirt, the vinyl was being really finicky, so it looked like it had melted and lifted in certain places. I apologize for the camera. So here what I'm doing is I'm sitting down and I have my mini heat press off to the side. And so I can see that in some places it's lifting, but I want to take each word separately. So I'm going to grab a pair of scissors and cut the plastic part in half, being very careful to not cut any of my calligraphy, and I'm going to take it one at a time. So the word woman actually melted on quite nicely, but it's just I have more control if I'm not trying to remove all the plastic from the entire unit. So one word at a time. And so yep, that lifted off beautifully. And so then I have my little heat press, because I know I was having some issues with the L and the P, so I'm just going to really go and make sure everything is nice and melted and secure. And so I'm still having trouble, so patience says let's start from the other side. So everything is lifting off really, really nicely. So just go slow here and be patient. So the vinyl came off, so now that it's off, I'm just going to go back over one more time just for my own sanity's sake with my mini heat press to make sure everything is nice and secure to the fabric. And I am happy with that. I'm going to lift that up and it looks good. Perfect. On to the makeup bag. So the makeup bag actually did really, really well after it was done being pressed.
So this workshop has focused a lot on putting your calligraphy on clothing products. But the process for putting your calligraphy on, let's say like a water bottle, let's say, is pretty similar with a couple of differences. So one of the first differences is the material that you're going to use. So you're just going to use a regular vinyl. If you're going to put your vinyl on something that goes outside or might go into the dishwasher, you definitely want to use a permanent vinyl. It's not going to be on there permanently, but it will withstand regular use until you finally decide to throw it away or get rid of it. The other thing, so that's the first thing. The second thing is when you go to set up your calligraphy in the software, you are not going to mirror image it. You're going to actually print it the way it shows up. And then when you print it out, you're going to weed like normal, and then you're going to use transfer tape to pick up the vinyl once it's been weeded and it looks appropriate. You're going to use transfer tape to pick up the vinyl, so the sticky side that will adhere to the bottle is going to be facing up, and then if my arm were the bottle, then you're going to apply the sticky side to the bottle. You're going to use a smoothing tool and then pick up the transfer tape, and that's essentially how it's going to work. So that's the other way that you can use it. So to recap, use the right vinyl, do not mirror image, and then you'll need transfer tape to pick up your vinyl and apply it to its final place. Okay, so that's basically it. We now have our All the Things makeup bag and our Phenomenal Woman t-shirt. Isn't that so pretty? I just love the gold on the black. Like, I just can't get over that. So I actually made this t-shirt. So the t-shirt is actually a gift for my sister. My sister is the phenomenal woman in my life. Honestly, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for her pushing me and inspiring me and encouraging me to pursue my love of crafts and calligraphy. And then the All the Things makeup bag. So, but on the screen, you'll see a way to join my mailing list. I would love to have you join the hive of Winnie B Designs, and a couple of lucky winners will get this custom All the Things makeup bag from me. I will, free of charge. I just want you to join my mailing list so you know all the fun things that are going on with Winnie B Designs. But that is it for my presentation. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, you can find me on social media at Winnie B Designs or on my website at www.winniebdesigns.com. But I hope you enjoy the rest of the program, and I look forward to seeing you in more workshops. Again, thank you so much for being here at the Summer Creative Retreat. If you have made it to this point in the video, you can use this link to get a special discount off at my Etsy shop. I would love for you to check it out and patron the shop if it's something that you like. And then here is the link also to join my mailing list. I will be giving away the All the Things makeup bag to a couple of lucky winners who joined the mailing list this month. But I hope you enjoy the rest of the Summer Creative Retreat. So glad that you are here. Know that you are loved, and I will see you around. Lastly, I just want to thank Peggy Dean again of the Pigeon Letters for inviting me to be a part of the Summer Creative Retreat. I am so excited to be here. I do not feel worthy of being here, but I'm glad to be here all the same. And so many amazing artists that you should check out. And one of the things I would like to recommend is I recommend that you go ahead and purchase the All Access Pass. Calligraphy, create art, it's a pursuit that never ends. Just when you think you've mastered one thing, you turn the corner and you realize that there is more to learn. So I hope that this workshop has been informative and has given you ways to think about turning your calligraphy, putting your calligraphy on more things.